Hey guys, Mulligan here, and welcome to the next part of my Omens of the Past card review. We're on the home stretch, with only 2 more videos to go. We'll be tackling Skycrag today. Before we get started, for those that didn't watch my previous videos, I will only be talking about the cards as far as viability for rank play. If the card isn't viable for rank play at all, then I will try to touch on its draft viability. Also, I won't be talking about the banners, since even though you couldn't get them out of empty thrown packs, they were still part of the previous metagame as set 0 cards. You just had to craft them. Let's jump in. First card I want to talk about is Champion of Fury, a 2-power 2/2 unit requiring 1 fire and 1 primal influence to play. When you have 2 fire influence, this gains +1 strength and charge, and when you have 2 primal influence, this gains +1 strength and overwhelm. So the artwork on this got spoiled a while back, and I think it got confirmed to be one of the champions from this set at that time, but I could be wrong on the latter. The ideal scenario with this is to get it down as a 3/2 charger on turn 2, and then activate Overwhelm on turn 3 to trade with something or do more face damage. I want to say that the Overwhelm ability on the primal side is interesting because there was an earlier patch a few months ago where a bunch of primal cards got buffed, and Direwolf stated they wanted to focus more on Primal's ability to overwhelm its opponents. So I thought that was kind of funny. This has been a core card in Skycrag aggro decks, and I expect will continue to be in the near future. Skycrag aggro is also the only deck I could see this champion fitting in. There has been talk about a Fire Primal Shadow aggro deck, but no lists have been optimized for that so far. This doesn't match up to Champion of Glory in my opinion, but I still like it for Skycrag. It also has synergy with Wump too. It's a good card. Next card is Kaylas Choice, a 2-power fast spell requiring 1 fire and 1 primal influence to play. You can either negate an enemy spell with a single faction or kill an enemy attachment with a single faction. I looked at this card in my 3rd preview video for this set. My thoughts on the card haven't changed. I haven't seen it much in the metagame, but I believe that is more due to only a few decks being able to actually play this card. Usually it's seen in Fire Justice Primal control decks and some Knucklebones lists. Most popular spells are single faction ones like Harsh Rule, Wisdom of the Elders, Annihilate, and Obliterate. As far as attachment removal, this hits your Xenan obelisks, your Paladin Oathbooks, Orc Runehammers, and even Permafrost. This isn't quite as good against Armory as you might think, though, since most of their relic weapons are actually multi-faction, which this doesn't target. Still a solid card that will be seen and constructed as long as control decks running Fire and Primal are viable. Next, I want to talk about Rockslide, a 2-power fast spell requiring 1 fire and 1 primal influence to play. You can either deal 2 damage to an enemy or deal 1 damage to 2 enemies. So this was the card I was mentioning when I talked about getting Harbinger's Bite back in this set while talking about Talon Dive in my Primal review. Instead of being locked into dealing 1 damage to 2 targets and gaining 2 health off the lifesteal, we get presented with a choice of how the damage is distributed in exchange for losing that lifesteal. I've seen people run this in their Skycrag aggro decks, and I've gotta say, I heavily disagree with the choice. People likely compare this to running Vara's Favor and Stone Scar aggro decks, but the beauty of Vara's Favor is that it also gains you a point of health, and more importantly, searches for power to keep your deck running, which this card doesn't do. I just think this is a bit too narrow to be used in Skycrag aggro, and it doesn't fit the game plan well enough. It's a decent Aegis popper though, if nothing else, so I can see the appeal. The only other deck we've seen this in is some Skycrag control lists, but not all of them play this card. I think it's a good card for what it does, but its place in the meta just depends on the viability of said control decks, I feel. The next card is Clan Hero, a 3-power 3/3 unit requiring 1 fire and 1 primal influence to play. It has Spark. When Spark is activated, you play a +2 Iron Sword on Clan Hero. The situation of this card has been an anomaly for me as far as constructed viability goes. But let's get this out of the way first. This card is excellent in draft, no question about it. But when I saw this, I really thought Skycrag aggro would pick this up as another 3-drop to complement Vadius, or at least be used as a budget option for those that don't have Vadius. I've seen people mention this as a budget alternative, but I've never seen the deck play this card up to this point. And people are even running Cloud Snake Harrier over this, which I think is a bit of a mistake. The other cards that are chosen over this, I could see reason for running, like Sensari Brigand and Shogun Scepter. I just feel this card is still being overlooked for Skycrag aggro, but I could be wrong. I'd like to know if anyone has tested this card in that deck. Share your experiences in the comments below if you have. Next card is Vadius Clanfather, a 3-power 3/2 unit requiring 2 fire and 1 primal influence to play. He has Quick Draw and Aegis, and an ultimate where you pay 7 to play a Steel Fang Chakram on Vadius. Skycrag's Power Sync Legendary in this cycle of cards. I love the art on this. Vadius just looks so cool to me. Vadius really fills in that somewhat bare 3-drop slot for Skycrag aggro, and is a solid unit in general thanks to Aegis. Quick Draw on a 3-strength unit is slightly less impressive than Unblockable on Bartholo, but very good nonetheless. I wasn't quite sure about the ultimate at first, but it has been an excellent power sync turn 7 where Skycrag aggro really doesn't have much to do other than attack to try and end the game. The Steel Fang Chakram is actually one of my favorite weapons in the game, especially since it has recursion on its own, which I'm kind of a sucker for. I was also concerned that Vadius would have Aegis pop too often before getting to use the ultimate, but that just hasn't been the case so far. Regardless, if you have the Chakram equipped and your Aegis is gone, then this is very weak to silence. The biggest reason Chakram doesn't see play in Constructed. As I expected when I first saw this, Vadius has become a bit of a gatekeeper for Skycrag aggro. The deck can still work if you don't have him, but it is so much better with him, as every other 3-drop in Fire or Primal pale in comparison. The next card is called Darren Cradle, a 4-power relic requiring 1 fire and 1 primal influence to play. For every 5 spells you play a 5/5 dragon with flying. The very first card I looked at from this set in my first preview video. I hoped back then that this card would push a spell-centric Skycrag control deck with burn as the win condition, but sadly that just hasn't been the case. All the control decks running those factions have skipped over this card and stuck to business as usual with Ikaria as their finisher. It's understandable, as the biggest issues with this card are drawing one in a timely manner, meaning you have to run 4 copies of these, and then playing enough spells where it would make an impact. And you don't always want to play spells just because when you're a control deck. It's just a bit slow to get going, though I don't think it's quite as slow as what others have made it out to be. Hopefully this sees more play in the future, especially because this card is even worse in draft, unless you manage to draft a ton of good spells in Fire and Primal. The next card is Hunter's Harpoon, a 4-power weapon, 1/1 weapon, requiring 1 Primal and 1 fire influence to play. It has Quick Draw. When the wielder hits the enemy player, you draw a card. Quite a few people were hyped about this card, and some still think it can be pretty busted. There are very few interactions in the game where you can get immediate draw off this, however, which is the biggest issue with this card. Not to mention it costs 4, where playing a 1/1 quick draw weapon can be pretty underwhelming. The only units that could get you immediate draw are Argenport Instigator, Wump Party Starter, and Yeti Snowchucker. Only Instigator sees widespread play between the 3, and a 3-color aggro deck doesn't seem very appealing to me. It would be cool to see what others come up with in the future, because this card isn't seeing a lot of play in Constructor right now. I have the same concerns about this as far as a draft pick too, though you might be able to get away with picking this for your deck and doing well with it. I'm not comfortable saying it's actually good in draft either, though. I'm holding judgment on this one. And the next card is Mortar, a 4-power fast spell requiring 1 fire and 1 primal influence to play. You deal 4 damage. I was really down on this card at first. Initially, it seemed to be everywhere in Skycrag aggro decks. I kept asking myself, even if this is a fast spell, why would I play this over Obliterate? I've come to respect it a little bit more recently. I still don't think this card is amazing at all, and some Skycrag aggro lists have started to move away from it, which I personally think is correct, but feel free to debate me if you don't think so. I don't know where else this would have a place in Constructed, though. I doubt the more controlling Skycrag burn decks would want this, but I could be wrong. At least in Draft, this card is an all-star. The next card is Stormglider, a 4-power 2/2 unit requiring 1 fire and 1 primal influence to play. He has flying and overwhelm, and you may pay 5 to give Stormglider +3 strength this turn. Unplayable in Constructed, since you have far better cards to play for 4. I'd rather play Hunter's Harpoon than this. I haven't seen this get actively picked in Draft either. Yeah, the ability is a power sink, but you have to spend power every turn to keep using it, and 5 power is a lot for a temporary buff. Otherwise, Serpent Trainer is much better than this, in my opinion. Pretty bad in Draft overall, and you wouldn't run this in your deck unless you had to. Next card is Towering Stranger, a 6-power 7/7 unit requiring 1 fire and 1 primal influence to play. While this is in play, Strangers have Overwhelm. Even though this has higher stats for the cost, I think this faces the same problem as Bereaved Stranger and Argenport. The Overwhelm on your Strangers won't really help without them having several buff auras in play already from stuff like Determined and Battle Tested Stranger. 2/2 Overwhelmed units aren't very scary otherwise. Also, this being a 7-drop makes it pretty slow. I just don't think Stranger decks will mess with this card, and there are better late game Strangers than this one. In Draft, I feel the same, even more so because not only do you need a good amount of Strangers, but unlike the others, they have to be the right ones for this to get mileage. Then again, it could just be an overstated bomb on its own in your Skycrag deck since it gives itself Overwhelm. I think I'd rather have Adaptive Predator over this, but this is definitely better in Draft than in Constructed. The next card is Knucklebones, a 7-power relic requiring 1 fire and 1 primal influence to play. When this comes into play, you transform each card in your deck into a random card. At the start of your turn, you draw an additional card. What was originally thought of as just a meme that no one took seriously has made quite a splash in Constructed in recent weeks. I still don't like the card personally. I don't think it's that good. But if people aren't going to run Relicate, then eventually the 2 cards drawn per turn will bury you. Even if the stuff you get is random, which is the part I hate, the mindset is that it doesn't matter what your win condition is. While there are wrong answers, there are no wrong threats, as a certain Magic the Gathering player used to say. I wouldn't be against crafting 2 copies of these if you wanted to mess with this right now. I'm not sure if this will hold up throughout the Omens meta though. I'm still concerned, but it's been a good card so far. The next card is Topaz Drake, a 7-power 4/3 unit requiring 1 fire and 1 primal influence to play. It has flying and charge. Awful in Constructed, but this was made for Draft. My concern though is that even with flying, a 4/3 unit for 7 power isn't super impressive. 3+ health flyers are more difficult to deal with in Draft, but not impossible. I don't know if I would pick this for my Draft deck if I'm in Skycrag unless I'm desperate for some late game bomb. But does Skycrag really need that? I think I'd rather have Towering Stranger over this, honestly, and wouldn't play this in Draft unless I had no other choice. The next card is Mulatto Nicola, an 8-power 8/8 unit requiring 3 fire and 3 primal influence to play. They have flying and Aegis and Spark. When Spark is activated, Deal 4 damage to each enemy. I also looked at this card in my third preview video for this set. Only Fire Justice Primal decks have used this card so far, but the pair has been pretty good in those decks, which excites me since, as I said in the preview video, this is the type of card I'm looking for when deciding on which high cost units should be my win condition for a control deck. I wasn't excited about the AoE back then, and so far it hasn't come into play that often, which I expected. Are there better finishers for control than this? Sure, but I don't think you can just outright dismiss this as an option if you're in Fire and Primal for your control deck. Obviously a snap pick bomb in draft as well. And the final card we'll be looking at is Decimate, a 10 power spell requiring 2 fire and 2 primal influence to play. You deal 10 damage. Decimate can't be negated or blocked by Aegis. To all the former Hearthstone players, we finally got Pyroblast Boys. This has largely been untouched and constructed since this set came out, however. Despite this blowing through Aegis, players would rather channel the Tempest something or someone and draw some cards off of it. And most control decks can make big enough channels to deal almost the same damage this would, and sometimes more due to the reactive nature of those decks. Control decks tend to have big hand sizes. I'm still hoping that Unicorn Skycrag deck shows up as a viable constructed deck, and that it finds a way to sport this card. Otherwise, I won't be surprised if this stays on the sidelines. I doubt I would pick this up in draft either, since while removal is like gold in that format, 10 power is a lot to pay. I could be wrong though. And that is it for the Skycrag cards in this set. For those that stuck around to the end, thanks so much for listening to my thoughts. Hopefully you enjoyed the content. If you did, feel free to like the video. If you want to check out more Eternal content, feel free to look around my channel. There's more on the way, so if you don't want to miss future videos, consider subscribing to the channel as well. Anyway, thanks again for taking time out of your day to watch this, and I'll see you all soon. Take care.